Okay, here's the deal. In this video, you are gonna need to get used to me being very annoying and very cringe very fast. If you don't know what the Omegaverse is, prepare to get flashbanged, and if you do know what the Omegaverse is, prepare to get flashbanged. You saw the title, Post Like You Live in the Omegaverse, so let me give you a look at what that actually looks like.
I want it to be known that I love you guys, and I'm sure that you can't control all of your bodily functions, like that's perfectly fine, but also, there is no reason that you need to be sitting in a puddle of your own slick in public because you made eye contact with a alpha.
Look, I love and support Omegas, but you Omegas cannot be blaming us Alphas for having a biological reaction to you. If you want to walk around in preheat wearing practically nothing, you can't blame us for what happened. Do you feel sufficiently out of your depth yet? Good. I don't know what you said. I just wanted to give you a positive affirmation. Hi again, guys, and welcome back to the #1 alpha on the internet, me. You're probably hearing all this talk of alphas and betas and thinking about manosphere stuff, but that could not be farther from what we're discussing today. Basically, there's been this trend on TikTok that's been on and off over the years, but seems to be at the peak of its relevance right now, where people are making videos talking about things like they actually live in an Omegaverse world. I should probably explain what that is. Basically, the Omegaverse is a system where everybody has a secondary gender that comes with secondary biological characteristics, and with those characteristics, stereotypes of what type of person that secondary gender makes you. It is very woke and liberal and cringe, but it's also equal opportunity, where both men and women can be any of those secondary genders. There's alphas, the stereotypically dominant ones at the top of the perceived hierarchy. There's omegas, the stereotypically submissive class at the bottom, and betas, the fellas in the middles whose secondary characteristics typically don't present as strongly as the other two genders. It usually also doesn't color their lives as overtly as the other categories, and they're often seen as analogous to a baseline human. Mileage may vary depending on an author. The dynamics work a little like this, where alphas are pressured by society into only mating down the ladder and never with other alphas though, where the ideal bond is with an omega, whereas omegas are only viewed as being able to date up, ideally with an alpha, but it's actively frowned upon when they mate with other omegas. And betas are ironically like blood type O, despite the ABO dynamics of the Omegaverse being out of step with the ABO dynamics of blood types. That's because they're seen as somewhat compatible with everybody, including each other, but traditional values view them as being less than ideal partners for anyone outside of their own secondary gender, other betas. If this feels like a sandstorm of information that doesn't give you nearly everything you need to know to be equipped for this, then that's exactly where I want you. There is so much history and nuance to the Omegaverse that I am intentionally leaving out of this that I could really make into its own video, which I probably will at some point, unfortunately, but that's just not what we're here to do today. And it's also much funnier for both you and me, honestly, if I throw you in head first into what living this life for real would be like in the discourse that might surround it. Beware, as soon as we get past my plug asking for you to subscribe, we will be in character for the rest of the video. You will practically be transported to an alternate universe where everything I just described to you is the laws of reality. There will be some exceptions depending on the context, so ahead of time I'm gonna establish this shit is not real. We're basically just RPing. This is all a psyop to weird you out so much that anytime I bring up other fanfiction related topics, they seem normal by comparison. And if you enjoy this video, this card at the end will take you to the last time I worried for the well-being of archive of our own authors. Also, only 28% of y'all are subscribed with notifications on. If you sub and hit the bell icon, you'll never miss an upload, and you can always undo it later. Alright, let's hear what that gentleman was saying earlier about sitting in a puddle of your own slick.
And then have the audacity to get on here and brag and be like, oh my god, like I don't know why I'm just always kind of wet. Like I'm always just kind of leaking slick. That's a problem. Go to the fucking doctor. You need a diaper. That's not a good thing.
Bear with me, you'll find this to be, no matter how aggressively the advice was delivered, probably one of the best supported and nuanced takes in regards to Omega biology this whole video. We're starting off strong, and if that didn't come off particularly strong to you, then that should give you an idea of where this is going. The thing is, you really only get one meat vessel. You really should learn how it works and what to look out for to best take care of it. Hell, ask Omegas who have actually been through the system, and they'll tell you the same shit. As an Omega, just getting a little bit of slick leaking through makes me so embarrassed. I don't know how some people do it shamelessly and without any medical concern. They are straight spitting and not from the back, thankfully. It's similar to how if you were a penis haver and you don't know that these are potential symptoms of testicular torsion, then the only person you're doing a disservice by not knowing is yourself. Get acquainted with your body and what could be the signs of something going wrong on the inside of the damn thing. Speaking of wanting to get inside someone's body, alphas. Historically, there has been tension regarding the societal expectations expectations around someone's conditions of birth, especially in regards to their secondary gender. The roles people were expected to fill in their communities were suffocating for everybody, but it left Omegas in particular significantly boxed in. We've come a long way since then. In today's age, it almost felt like we'd lived in a world that had moved past the pre-described gender roles of Alpha and Omega, and those things no longer determined who you were meant to be, how you would be perceived. That the harmful rhetoric demanding certain behavior and presentation out of Omegas was a thing of the past. But that just isn't the case, as some of this same brand of rhetoric has taken on a new form that has led to real-world harm when left unchallenged.
I don't want to buy suppressants. I'm going broke. I can't afford them. You should be able to control your urges. Use your fucking suppressants, bitch. You're not about to come into my workspace, an alpha workspace, and not have suppressants. You know what your pheromones do. You know what's going on. Use the fucking suppressants, bitch, or you don't have a job no more. You can't work here if you're not going to use the fucking suppressants. It's in the book. Y'all read the book. You signed the contract. And bitch,
damn, these types of extremists really just say the quiet part out loud now, aren't they? Hey, you have to suppress this normal, involuntary biological function because it bothers me, otherwise you won't have a job anymore. It's your fault, not mine. This is the type of thing that landlords were saying to Omegas right before they evicted them when they went into heat in the 40s. Even in the comfort of your own home, you have to wear heat suppressants because the hallways smell like a pine forest when it should smell like the daffodil Febreze I sprayed the place with so I'd know if something was up. What happened to solidarity between us, man? Jesus Christ. Now, make no mistake, don't think this kind of language is confined to just the way alphas talk about Omegas. Alphas can even talk about other alphas just as recklessly. The language being used in these discussions is so inflammatory and completely antithetical to productive dialogue. Like, look at this. As an alpha, I am once again disappointed in being one. I'm an alpha, but I'm not disappointed in myself. You alphas cannot control yourself when an Omega is at their most vulnerable state. Control that wrinkly, dehydrated horse of yours, you mutt! Ugh, that's dirty, man. Whoa. I get the person saying this is an alpha too, but words like that are not diffusing any tension by a mile. Didn't school teach us to behave, but the only thing behaving is your continuous green aura, with confused and dead flies surrounding you wherever you flaunt those rancid pheromones. Do better, alphas. And like, clearly there's some level of mutual understanding of how sense from all parties can affect everyone around us, whether you're an Omega, Alpha, or even a Beta. And this person themselves is an alpha and knows that they personally aren't like this. So ascribing this behavior to the whole group of alphas that isn't you is counterproductive, man. And like I said, even betas have a sensitivity to pheromones, if a more muted one. But even with them, some of the language individual betas have been using is just so far beyond the pale and is not conducive to progress.
As a beta, you know what I think is really interesting with the whole Omega scent blocker situation? So I can't smell your second gender scent. So I just get the smell you get from your environment. My Omega friends bring their alpha around, or they point out, oh my god, that person's an alpha, oh my god, aren't they so cute? I have to interact with said alpha. The gust of stench I get. You're telling Omegas with scent blockers, you need deodorant is what you need. You walk past me, my friends are giggling, I'm thinking like this, cause you smell like pennies, quarters, and corpses. We can turn into alphas. Why do you not take care of your body odor at all? Freak.
In a vacuum, the argument for the necessity of heat suppressants for not just the safety of an Omega, but an Alpha as well, can make sense. There are legitimate cases of Alphas out there who experience legit medical complications when they intake heightened Omega pheromone. They can be genuinely hospitalized by things like it. The thing is, we don't exist in a vacuum. We exist in the context of all in which we live and came before us. That person who experienced real suffering and trauma as a result of an Omega not wearing heat suppressants was radicalized unreasonably from an otherwise valid experience to be concerned by. They were saying things like Omegas are directly inconveniencing the rest of society by not wearing heat suppressants, when statistically what happened to this alpha is a fringe case. Most alphas exist in society around Omegas even when they're in heat completely normally and without an issue. But far more often than an Omega hospitalizing an alpha with their scent, an alpha being unable to control themselves around an Omega and that Omega ends up getting victimized victimized is much more common. Both of these things are obviously bad. They can both be things that happen. And other things can also happen in the same vein. There are recorded cases of an alpha's scent also affecting everybody around them in similar harmful ways. But this nuance will never be addressed, and we can't even begin to process how to do something about it if we continue this back and forth of shit slinging at each other. That includes betas, omegas, as well as alphas who are unreceptive to criticism being leveled at them the way they do to other secondary genders. We have to listen to each other.
If omegas have to wear scent blockers, then alphas should wear deodorant. I don't think so. You got it all twisted, beta. See, I usually don't respond to anything a beta says. I don't acknowledge their opinions. Bottom of the barrel beta. But this one I am going to respond to just because I feel like you don't understand why alphas don't wear deodorant and why we try to make our body scent stinky as possible. And that is simply because we're trying to make sure you bottom of the barrel beta don't come next to us.
This guy has got hands for everybody he perceives as talking shit. I mean, omegas obviously stay getting shit on everywhere they go. My omega friends tell me about it all the time. I've seen how they get treated. But betas too from this dude? Like, you don't listen to what they say ever? God damn. And of course, the thesis of this video is standards for thee, but not for me. You actively know that you're forcing your pheromones onto people in public who do not want to be sniffing that shit. The same way you criticize omegas for forcing their pheromones onto you. So you want omegas to cover up their scent glands because it inconveniences you. You want them to use heat suppressants because it inconveniences you, but you won't do the same for others specifically because you want to inconvenience them.
I really believe the stereotype that omegas were lazy, they shouldn't be working because they're not good at it. But now I'm starting to believe it because if you can't even pick up a few extra shit for $30 fucking for your heat suppressants, you're worried about the wrong shit. You need to reevaluate your life. So to sum it up, I really don't think this is an omega and an alpha problem. I feel like this is a broke people problem.
And this is the part I find so frustrating. Despite all this alpha's unwillingness to do what they ask of others, they still get within an inch of understanding the heart of the actual issue here. It's not an omega problem, it's a broke people problem, they say, implying that omegas don't use heat suppressants because they got their funny up instead of their money up. $30 was the figure they put forward as a completely reasonable price to buy heat suppressants with and was easy to obtain. They mention that amount like it's nothing and not somehow the equivalent of 4 hours of work for some people. Let's assume that is the average operating cost per month for heat suppressants. If that's $30 monthly, that is $360 a year that omegas are expected to pay in order to just exist and function in public society. An expectation in a bill not placed on the shoulder of any other secondary gender. And using that $30 figure is talking about the state of the world very generously. Now let's look at reality. Across the board, $30 for heat suppressants is bad enough. But unfortunately, in comparison to most places in the US, that would be a great deal if it actually even existed anywhere. The average working class omega whose work requires them to wear heat suppressants, often without covering the cost of the mandated heat suppressants themselves, the actual out-of-pocket price for those heat blockers is upwards of $150 US. And it is not considered essential coverage by private insurance providers. And that's just today. Prices for heat blockers are consistently rising with inflation. The same way that the cost of living has skyrocketed across the board for everybody in regards to housing, food, gas, and other essentials, you still demand that omegas be required to add an additional cost on top of what everybody else already has to pay just to get by in today's economy. That's not even to mention that in a time where everybody is struggling just to make ends meet, sometimes not wearing heat suppressants is one of the only things an omega can take an advantage of to try and make sure they're able to pay that much rent on time. One omega on TikTok shared their experience going through this exact scenario.
My job, it is not required for omegas to use suppressants, and I don't use suppressants because why would I let you stop my bag? What I mean by that is I get more tips when I don't use suppressants. When I ask the host for tables and I tell them that I need more tables, they give me more tables. When I tell the cooks that I need my food like on the fly, they give me my food.
Listen, in tough times like these, some people have to do what they can to just get by. People in Europe talk about you have to even pay $30, it's free here. Some people anecdotally report having heat blockers available for free at their local library, which is all well and good, I'm happy for you, but unfortunately that makes you the exception to the rule. Access is withheld from omegas in many places services, and not just access to heat blockers because of their outrageous pricing, but also essential Omega education. Omegas are kept in the dark about things they absolutely need to know about their bodies, and not giving them this information, withholding it from them, is incredibly dangerous. For instance, we have the issue of excessive slicking mentioned earlier in the video, where many Omegas have bragged about it as a source of pride, when it is not normal to do that outside of heats at all. That shit could be a major concern and indicate something potentially life-threatening. Healthcare is failing our Omegas in many similar ways. The pressure put on Omegas to use heat blockers, even with how inaccessible they are, has led to some, as a last-ditch effort, resorting to off-market suppliers that have no approval or even awareness by the FDA. You have doctors having to go on TikTok and post about how they have to tell Omegas not to take heat blockers they made at home because it's turning their slick pink. And for some, it's even more of a baseline biology issue than that, where heat blockers just aren't even an option. In the same way that alphas can have major health complications from exposures to Omegas and heat, Omegas can have just as adverse of a reaction to the same heat suppressants it's so expected of them to be wearing anywhere they go in public. And listen, I hear you. I understand that inaccessibility to rut suppressants for alphas affects them as well. Some say that they cost the same as heat blockers, but you never hear an alpha complaining about them. And truly, I empathize with what y'all have to go through when using those, but historically, the pressure on alphas to suppress their ruts is just not comparable to the pressure on an Omega to block their heat. If an alpha doesn't control themselves and targets an Omega, it's always chalked up to a biological reaction and somehow they're absolved of responsibility. And instead, it's framed like the Omega is basically asking for it because they weren't suppressing their heat. It's a complete double standard when there are too many variables at play for such binary thinking to be even applicable. Even in places where rut blockers are mandatory but not provided, do you not see this issue? There is a commonality here, a common ground. From a bird's eye view, there's obviously a wider discussion to be had about the role of suppressants in our society, whether it's even moral or ethical to mandate them for alphas or Omegas both, and if so, should insurance cover them or should they be provided free of charge by the government? But the dialogue is so skewed away from the root of the issue in so many different angles. Some Omegas will say that if alphas think they should cover up so bad, then they should pay for those heat suppressors, shouldn't they? It's an alpha's role to provide for Omegas after all, which itself is flawed because it unwittingly plays into dated ideas of what alphas, betas, and Omegas are meant to be as people, based on biology they had no control over. On the other hand, Dainty, that same alpha from before, the one who demands that Omegas use their heat blockers if they deign to go in public at all, recommends that if they can't afford market-regulated ones, that Omegas buy their blockers off of Temu. Fucking Temu. Then they say that it's easy for Omegas to get the ingredients to make heat blockers at home. The same process we just discussed prior as turning their slick pink. I repeat, pink, and can be incredibly dangerous to use. We don't even know the full extent of the effects. Between the two different viewpoints, one suggestion absolutely risks a lot more material harm, but both are reductive and miss the heart of the issue. Let's say if blockers of any kind are expected or required for anybody, betas, Omegas, alphas, you name it, whether it's socially or it's made mandatory by your workplace for medical reasons, or it's determined as something as drastic as a need for baseline public safety, then the fact they are made so inaccessible like they are now, and the onus is put on the person the demand is being made of to cover the cost themselves, that is not a failure on the person. That is a failure of the society they live in. If you can't participate in public life because of things out of your control that can be reasonably accommodated for, then you have not failed in society. The society has failed people like you. And nothing is ever going to change in the status quo if we keep bickering with each other instead of addressing the core of the issue. We can argue on TikTok and comment sections and in YouTube videos all day, but on its own, it means nothing if we don't get out there and do something. In particular, the alpha who kicked off a lot of the discourse in this video has had a lot to say on the matter, more than most people I've seen. We can't possibly cover it all, but I gathered every TikTok they made over 4 days on Omega-related social issues. I counted the minutes and tallied them up, and they have produced nearly an hour of content on this in half a week. They have lots of opinions despite saying they want to stop being tagged, but that rings hollow because they are responding to things that they weren't tagged in at all.
See, you turned off your stitches because you knew I was coming for you. So let's get into this.
They are actively seeking these kind of posts out, and their level of involvement in these matters tipped me off that something here wasn't right. And when I went looking, I certainly found something. Get this. This person has presented as an alpha this entire time, but there are very old records of them speaking on these same issues from the perspective of other secondary genders, presenting themselves as an Omega or a Beta in some circumstances. circumstances. This dude has spoken from the point of view of an alpha who wants Omegas to wear heat suppressants, as an Omega sick of being told to use heat suppressants, as a Beta who thinks they are the only normal group of people left on Earth and thinks that both sides are annoying. Also a Beta who is an Omega ally. They've, from the perspective of an Alpha, championed an example of their idea of one of the good Omegas and did the opposite from the perspective of an Omega, and so much more. Who knows what their actual identity or what their actual ideology is? It matters not, because what is clear from this is that they are just trying to stir the waters. They are merely an agitator. They're an accelerationist trying to heat up the kettle to make things boil to that tipping point even faster. The constant fighting between us is what they want and what they're hoping to motivate. And I'm finally breaking character. I kept it up for 5 pages. How do y'all think I did? I really do respect how dedicated Dainty Potato is to this bit. Like, they have been pumping out and stimulating the Omegaverse TikTok economy single-handedly for like the last week. And they sell the delivery so well, like a little too well sometimes. Even I started tweaking a little bit. Like, I had to ask myself, like, why do I feel a little offended? Like, how dare you say that kind of thing? That is so messed up and wrong and outdated. Then I realized, oh shit, I'm mad at something I made up in my head. If only the real world had more instances of that particular type of revelation. The thing is, this shit was getting genuinely so heated on TikTok that Potato themselves couldn't tell how serious some people in their comments were being at one point.
I'm all going off the stuff I read in BL and on Wattpad, but I thought you guys were joking too, and I thought it was just like a big joke. But now people are genuinely telling people to like...
in the same way that some people got confused watching their videos, everybody involved was a little too good at getting into character sometimes. Shit was insane. You had dudes in the comments asking, I don't remember placing this brick, as in building your For You page brick by brick and having no idea what you did that could bring you to this particular side of the platform. People who maybe knew what the Omegaverse was but still got side-eyed. Some people said they felt like they got warped into an alternate universe. And then there were some people so out of their depth, they needed what a heat suppressant was explained to them. Hell, even people who write some of the fictional source material this entire shit show is based off had to recalibrate their brain in order to realize that we weren't having these arguments in earnest.
As an Omegaverse author, it's a little embarrassing that it took me a bit to realize people weren't being serious. I spent a lot of time writing this weekend, like a lot. I spent a lot of time in the heads of my characters, and it didn't even stick out to me at first that this wasn't real.
You see, her issue was the exact opposite of what pretty much everyone else went through, where she spends so much time immersed in the world building and social mechanics of an Omegaverse world that she didn't realize, oh wait, right, I made that shit up in my head. And trust me, those mechanics and world building are a rabbit hole all its own. One I am unfortunately thinking about making a video on. I'm gonna wrap this up here. That card I mentioned should be on screen. If you enjoyed, be sure to drop a like and subscribe with notifications on. Anyways, this has been Kwite, and I'm out of things to out about myself.